Okay, I guess I'll start. Hey guys, I'm Lauren Zelt. I see a couple of familiar faces out there. Nice to see you guys again. So I currently own my own communications firm. We do everything from regular campaign communications, some corporate work. We do a lot of television and radio work with a variety of clients, including issue advocacy and some others. But my background is both in television and also campaign politics. I was a booking producer at the Fox News Channel between the end of 2009 and 2012. After that, I went into work briefly at the RNC. I was only there for about a month, and then I joined the Romney campaign in 2012 for president as director of media affairs. After that, I worked at a DC consulting firm called FP1 Strategies. I was able to work with a variety of candidates on the federal, state, and local levels. And then in 2015 and 2016, I worked for former US Senator Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire. So if you have any burning questions about New Hampshire politics, I'd be happy to talk about those. But yeah, so that's kind of my background. I've worked, like I said, at a variety of different levels of politics and a lot of different campaigns, too many to count. But one of the best things for me has always been being able to give back and chat with Georgetown students. So I'm super glad to be here today. And yeah, I'll kick it over to Tim.
Thanks, Lauren. Hey, everyone. Good to see some familiar faces. My name is Tim Lim. Currently, I actually do a number of things. It's hard to encapsulate right now into one, but I run my own journal consulting firm, Lim Consulting Services. I'm also a senior advisor in a creative agency called the Hooligans Agency, and have started a number of political agencies in the past. Just recently, I was a partner at Nuco Strategies, a woman-led, minority-led journal consulting firm. Before that, I was a partner at Bully Pulpit Interactive for about 6 years. Bully Pulpit Interactive, one of the largest political advertisers on the Democratic side, agency of record for Hillary for America, for Obama for America, Priorities Next Gen, a number of different super PACs and campaigns. And before that, I was a partnerships director at change.org. That's probably where I would say I got my digital beginnings, and that was for about a year. But my true beginnings are in the field and are in campaigns. I worked on Gray Davis for governor in California. I worked for Howard Dean in New Hampshire. Nod to Lauren. Worked in Concord for, yes, I think I said that correctly, for about a year and a half with folks like Robbie Mook and Jeremy Byrd and Buffy Wicks. And then worked on a number of governors and congressional campaigns. So my roots are in field, which is ironic today because there's probably going to be no field this cycle at all. But my most recent experience, my expertise is in digital, particularly with paid digital advertising, which I think will play a significant role in this election, and I think is one of the topics we'll be covering today. So. I think, Lauren and I talked, we don't really have a strict agenda. I think we were going to try to talk about like the life cycle of a communications and marketing plan. I think Lauren will kick off with kind of the front end of the process, and then I'll talk a lot more about the implementation and the kind of the implementation on the social media level. I have some best practices documents that I'll be covering, and some relevant examples from this cycle. So, Lauren, you want to kick that off, and I'll
there. So I don't know how familiar you guys are with a general campaign kind of communication structure overall, but just to kind of break it down for you, and I'm going to do it through the lens of a typical Senate campaign for U.S. Senate, I think is something that we can digest. In terms of the communications process, there are a lot of different players in developing a message and disseminating a message. Usually when you're determining your communication strategy overall, people that would be involved in that effort generally at least one, if not more, general consultants on a race. These are people like Tim or myself that have, a lot of experience doing campaigns at different levels. So you'll have a general consultant. Typically, you'll have your ad maker involved, so the person that makes television advertisements, radio advertisements, and then similarly to that, your digital ad guru as well. You try to get sort of the top folks, brainstorming and collaborating on messages at first, just so that, everyone can be on the same page, and so that you can develop a strategy that is cohesive for sort of every unit of the campaign involved. Also, a communications director is usually directly involved in that as well, as is the candidate. Sometimes this is helpful, sometimes it's not. But at the end of the day, it is their name on the ballot. And so you kind of usually have that core group deciding on messaging for a campaign. Generally, campaigns will have kind of an overarching strategy of what they want to communicate about themselves, especially if you're an incumbent or if it's an open seat. Often a lot of the messaging is about you as a candidate. If you're a challenger, so let's say you're a Republican that's trying to get a Dem seat, a lot of the messaging may start out being about your opponent, trying to define your opponent, in ways that, you feel that they have not served their constituent base. So it just depends on kind of what kind of a candidate you are, what the environment is right now. I know a lot of campaigns during COVID-19, the messaging has changed significantly. Right now it's a very dangerous time to attack other candidates, just because it can be seen as, sort of tone deaf in the environment that we're in. And so that's something to consider too. A campaign that may have really kicked off last summer and had an overarching message, let's say it was based on jobs, the economy, national security. I'm just trying to think of like issues that Republicans usually message on. Let's say a Republican candidate had kind of entered into a race and wanted to focus on those topics. Obviously with the COVID-19 pandemic, that's had to change, especially on the Republican side, given, where we are in the economy, and, obviously the devastation that's happening in the country. So usually start a campaign with what you would want to be sort of your top line message points. Like I said, on the Republican side, it usually is about jobs, economy, national security. Depending on the candidate, sometimes you can get into some domestic issues. Like, for example, when I worked for Kelly Ayotte, she was actually a really green candidate. And that was just because of the nature of representing a state like New Hampshire. It's a purple state. So she had done a lot at the federal level, so for example, like she was one of the only senators, I think, to endorse the Clean Power Plan, to get behind some of these green initiatives. And so it's going to be a case by case, depending on what state you're looking in, as to what issues resonate with voters. The other thing is, another person that would be involved a lot in messaging, developing messaging overall, at the beginning would be a pollster, because they're going to be in the field, trying to figure out what's on the minds of the people that will be voting. And so that person will be involved as well. So like, whereas in New England, you might see some more of these traditionally Democratic, green issues being important, things like that. Whereas, if you're a Republican representing a border state, you may want to talk more about immigration, the border, things like that. It just depends on kind of where you are. But so once you kind of come to a place where you as a candidate have kind of defined your top level messaging items, it's then it then falls to each different person in a campaign to communicate those. So for example, the ad maker is going to try to make television spots that highlight your top messaging points. Your digital director, which I'm sure Tim will get into, will talk about how to disseminate that message on social media. Your communications director will then be tasked with developing a more detailed plan about how to communicate that message every week. So, one of the jokes about the current admin, at least before COVID, was that, oh, it's infrastructure week again, right? Like that was always a joke. But that, if you're messaging in a campaign, you will have theme weeks like that. You'll have an infrastructure week. You'll have, just different weeks based on different issues that you will then as a campaign try to communicate. And again, you do have to work with events that are very much a part of the news cycle. So for example, in 2015 and 2016, the heroin crisis in New Hampshire was really bad. And the campaign didn't do a lot of messaging on it, but in her official office, we talked a lot about Kelly's efforts to pass the comprehensive, CARA, the CARA Act, to try to get some more funding to the states, that were trying to turn the tide in the opioid epidemic. And so that's something that, like, again, maybe you started a campaign and you didn't see coming up, but became a very top issue of a state, so in that instance, it maybe wasn't appropriate for the campaign to talk about it, but the official office talked about her work in the Senate and what she had done to try to turn the tide on that. And so, from then, especially, I'm sorry, one of my dogs really wants to eat. Then from there, you'll have a lot of, especially in the communications department in general, it's how do we disseminate that message that we've decided to focus on this week. And that'll be everything from, you'll put out press releases, you'll do candidate events, obviously during this time. And I think that's going to be one of the most interesting things about 2020 is that events are really not going to be, as pivotal of a part of a campaign as they have been pretty much since the beginning of our great republic. I think it'll be interesting to see where we are come August, September, and whether or not candidates are really out doing a lot of events again. But traditionally, if you are a senator running for re-election or someone trying to be a challenger and run for US Senate, a typical week would have maybe, yes, that's a really good backdrop, Tim Lim. A typical week, you'd have at least 20 events, many a day, where, the candidate is out with the press secretary, visiting different parts of the state to try and amplify that message, get earned media coverage from, local and sometimes national sources. And so, it just comes down to every little, every distinct bucket of the campaign trying to communicate that one cohesive message that, some of the key players at the beginning of a campaign had decided on. So, obviously I'll be happy to answer any questions about earned media. I've specialized a lot in being a press secretary, communications director, getting those newspaper pieces, getting those great pieces on, the 6 p.m. news, getting that candidate onto, Fox, CNN, MSNBC, whatever it is. Definitely happy to answer specific questions about that, but figured I'd kick it over to Tim for the digital element.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. And yes, I love trying out new Zoom backgrounds. There are some calls where I'm not allowed to do Zoom backgrounds, so I will take advantage of these moments when I can. And I might be even switching them out during the middle of this call. Yes, that was another one. I do have that in my repertoire. And so I encourage everyone on this Zoom, please check out your virtual backgrounds. Yeah, so I'll take the ball from Lauren, and using sports references also feels weird these days, and kind of move it forward. So in terms of what a digital operation looks like on a campaign, a lot of it is varying, and it really depends on the size and the scale of the campaign. But on the smaller side, when you're looking at like congressional races, even some state rep races, etc., you normally will have kind of a dual role or comm staffer that kind of takes on a lot of different duties. One of which is to maintain the online presence of the campaign. And then as you get bigger and bigger, Senate campaigns, governor's campaigns, and then you get to presidential or major super PAC, you have digital operations at the highest level that are dozens of people that are handling both paid, organic, both from email, CRM, data targeting, social media, and et cetera. And so it really depends on the size and the scale of the campaigns, and then the operations will scale up that way. There is a very intense debate right now on the Democratic side of what a well-staffed digital operation looks like, and how does that look like in this COVID time, and should we outsource or should we not? If you're reading the New York Times or Politico, you're going to see these stories pop up. So that is something that I think is going to be pretty fascinating to watch and see how that turns out for the Biden folks. I think for everyone on this call, everyone's familiar with the social media platforms that are most used. By far, Facebook is the #1 platform for campaigns. That might sound archaic to some of you, but for those who have worked on campaigns or have volunteered, Facebook is the #1 for a lot of folks in terms of usage, in terms of acquisition, in terms of paid dollars. When you are spending money on social media, particularly advertising, the #1 place where it's going to go to first is Facebook. And the ROI that you see from Facebook in terms of getting email addresses, in terms of raising dollars, it's unquestionable. There's no other platform that can really attain that type of performance and ROI. So that's why a lot of campaigns are spending their time and energy on Facebook. You have platforms that have banned political advertising, so it's not as fruitful from an advertising standpoint. Obviously, Twitter is the most prominent example right now. So is TikTok. Now they allow political content. They're just not taking in dollars, so you can run political advertising. So a lot of campaigns are still using these for organic reach, but not spending dollars on them because they can't. And then you have some new upstarts that are starting to get more and more paid dollars, like Snapchat. And Snapchat, I think in particular, is going to make a big play for paid dollars on campaign side this year. They have pretty good reach, and they have really good ad units on social media. And so I think a lot more campaigns are going to be spending money on Snapchat. I don't necessarily know if they're going to be spending a lot of time with the content, but it is a good distribution channel for a number of folks. I mean, in terms of best practices, I think this is all kind of common sense stuff. But I'll say it, and I'll be the first to admit, I am bad at social media. Like, I always try to think of the quirky tweet or like the viral post, and I never seem to get that. So I'm not the first person to tell you how to make something go viral. I also think there's a myth of how to make something go viral versus not. Most things that go viral is by luck and chance, timing. It has nothing to do with skill. And so, there are some folks who are just constantly pumping out content on social media and able to do it, but really it just depends on how famous you are and how popular you are, or how much people know you. But these are some best practices that I'll list out that you can take with you, that you can use. Like I said, this is not mind-blowing stuff, but it is stuff to just keep in mind, because it is stuff that campaigns will expect, right? Campaigns will expect some sort of, if you are going to be joining their digital team, if you're going to be joining their social media operation, that they're going to want to know that you have a baseline understanding. So keep character counts in mind. There is a very, very big focus on this, just because a lot of folks think that you really should write massive things on social media posts, and it really is not true. If there's someone who wants to do a deep dive, you can set that up as a thread, or you can have it link out to a Medium post or whichever. But you just gotta keep character counts in mind. I mean, on Twitter, it should be ideally like 70, no more than 100. On Facebook, it should be less than 80. So you really just remember character counts. Stand out, use emojis, line breaks, capitalization, memes, visuals. Do not write straight up text only. That's probably the thing that will get the least amount of attention. So make sure to add in all these, little quirks that can be able to stand out and make that happen. I always forget to do this in my post, and I just write like stream of consciousness thought. So that's why nobody reads my tweets. Mind the algorithms. Algorithms make or break. They make or break developers. They make or break apps, and they make or break posts. So Facebook, it prioritizes friend posts over publishers, and it uses engagement to predict posts that the user will like. So they are purposely trying to put in content that is going to get more engagement so that people are spending more time on Facebook. Twitter's top tweet first. It features factors in recency, engagement, media type, location. So algorithms play a huge role as to what tweets or what posts you're going to see ahead of others. And that's why for a lot of brands, it makes very little sense to spend so much time on their organic content, trying to make something really go viral when they're really competing against every other brand. And that's why they spend so much time and money on paid posts, because that just forces the post to be shown in front of the end user. Make sure that you mind the platform, that you know which platform you're on. People are using hashtags for Facebook posts or for Snapchat. So it's like, use hashtags on Twitter and Instagram. Don't use hashtags on Facebook. Make sure to hat tip, or make sure to call out very specific profiles, especially folks who have large followings. People just try to use the same post for every single platform, and that really doesn't work. Give people something to do. Make sure you have an ask at the end of it. If you're a political campaign and you don't put an ask especially on a post that gets a lot of traction and engagement, that's criminal behavior. Like, you really have just missed an opportunity to get people to sign up, to do something. You don't have much of an opportunity to grab people's attention in this type of media environment. So always make sure that when you're putting out posts, that there is an ask involved somehow, whether it's learn more, click here, sign up, whatever it is. But make sure you always put the ask at the end of it. And also, you gotta make it a two-way conversation. If you're just throwing stuff at people and you're not responding, it gets really boring really fast. Now, there's a limit to this, right? Like, you have to make sure that it's like phone banking. You want to get the most amount of information to that person as possible, but not drowning yourself in an hour-long discussion. So make it a two-way conversation. Be responsive on social media. A lot of folks are using chatbots. That's most campaigns that you're going to work with are not using chatbots. They're going to be real life people that are going to be responding. So make sure that followers and people who are online and are realizing they're talking to a real human being. I mentioned the visuals. Use lots of visuals, videos, GIFs, photos. These visuals always move engagement a lot more than just plain text. On Facebook, they actually have specific rules on their Facebook ads of how much visual versus text you have, because their algorithms and their data shows that the more visual it is, the more likely you're going to have engagement. So wordy, like memes or things that just have a lot of text, unless it's just the most hilarious thing that you've ever read in your life, usually you can, when they say pictures are worth 1,000 words, it's in social media's case, it's literally valued at that. Always get a second pair of eyes before you post anything. If you are overseeing a candidate or organization's feed, if you're actually the one posting, you do not want to be the only one responsible. That is a lot of responsibility, and that's a lot of liability. So always make sure that you have someone that is over, it's the two-person rule, right? If someone's writing something, the other person checks it, vice versa. So always make sure that you have a two-person rule in place when posting things in public. This rule will save lives, I promise. So make sure that you always have a second pair of eyes on these postings. Lastly, follow the data. Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, all of these platforms have tools to be able to measure engagement, measure reach, measure frequency, measure how many clicks, measure how many times people are engaging. Look at what's working and what's not, right? If there are certain topics that are popping, and there's certain threads that are getting much more engagement than others, then follow the data, follow the numbers. Social media engagement on campaigns is a heavily numbers driven type of programming. So, if you're getting higher engagement on topics around COVID versus topics that are not COVID, there's a reason, right? That makes total sense. That's what's happening right now for a lot of campaigns. Follow the data, make sure that you're listening to it, because that's going to make sure that you have higher performing posts and higher performing social media program moving forward. So those are best practices. I mean, to kind of put it in 2020 terms, as I'm calling it, or COVID terms. And Lauren and I mentioned this beginning, Lauren mentioned this, but the world of campaigning has fundamentally changed, right? And to think that we're going to go back to a world that's that's like December 2019, in the next couple of months, I think is it's foolhardy. And so for a lot of my clients and for a lot of the folks that I'm advising, I mean, even I'm preaching this to the I'm yelling this at the mountaintops. Any reporter will say this, is that we have to be prepared, right, to fundamentally just have a contactless campaign rather than face to face. It's going to be face to device, and that's really the notion of how campaigns going to look like this cycle, and it may be even cycles after that, right? So how do you replicate the large rally, right? How do you replicate that person to person door knock? How do you replicate? You may not be able to replicate it 100%, and that's not the point. But how can you create the sensation or the feeling of that as much as possible? And there are some case studies right now and test cases right now that seem to be working more than not. So a good example that I'm using for a lot of folks is DJ Nice, right? The DJ Nice parties on Instagram, the IG parties, they're getting 50 to 60,000 people. Right. And when you talk to the people who are on it, they're talking about, they're feeling euphoric, they're feeling great, they're feeling happier. Right. And you may not be in the same room as DJ Nice, but to be in that Instagram feed and to be able to watch that video, there's definitely a sensation or feeling that those people are getting that have them coming back again and again and again. And so not that we're asking Joe Biden to become a DJ and start playing his own playlist, but how do you get a feeling on these online platforms that will recreate or replicate that type of sensation where people get from face to face, from attending that type of large event. Secondly, door knocks are going to probably not be happening, and if they are, they're at risk of being shut down very quickly if we have another COVID wave. So in the world where you don't have door knocks and you can't have people going door to door, knocking on doors, all the data has shown door knocking or face-to-face contact is the most persuasive contact. How do we replicate that? Through your phone, through social media, through texting. So, I think a lot of what you're going to see in the next several months, you're going to see text banking. You're going to see cell phone banking from home. You're going to see. I've talked to folks who are going to be working on video conference banking, like literally reaching out to friends and family through video conference to talk about their candidates. This is going to take relational organizing to a level that to a very extreme level, a level that we weren't really sure how it's going to play out. But I can tell you that there will, people are going to try and test out so many different things. And you're going to have some spectacular failures and you're going to have some spectacular accomplishments. I don't think anyone could have predicted the DJ Nice, the DJ, I call the DJ Nice phenomenon, but now everyone's trying to replicate this, right? And everyone's having like a DJ party. Every week I get invited to one from organization. It's, like, hey, come to this DJ party, not DJ Nice, but some other DJ. If you give $25 and you can get in there. You also see a lot of gamification. This is the thing that this is probably the most uncharted territory that's going to try to be charted this cycle. Is you're going to see a lot of folks try to figure out Gamification in a way of all different shapes and sizes. Gamification of voting, gamification, just online gaming, even trying to figure out how to break into online games, right? I know campaigns who are set up Animal Crossing houses, which I'm on Animal Crossing now. I can't believe I'm saying that, and I'm very intrigued to see how this is going to work. I know Next Gen had a Animal Crossing gathering on Earth Day, and it was the #1 mobilized event for the week. So, you know, Fortnite, Animal Crossing, Twitch, Steam, all of these different platforms where you're going to see a lot more usage out of, you know, because of the situation today. You know, I think you're going to see campaigns try to break in or try to like figure out how to insert themselves into this, into this environment. Because this is where a lot of people are spending their time, and I don't think the usage is going to go down necessarily that much. And so, how does online gaming play a role for campaigns moving forward? Pokemon Go was the big success story for campaigns in 2016, 2018, right? You had campaigns you had super PACs setting up, Pokemon Go stops near volunteer locations so that people would go volunteer more, learn more. So how does that work when you're not going outside and not interacting? So that will be, I think, a very, very interesting and I think you're going to see like the first online, you're going to see like the first, Animal Crossing rally or the first Fortnite rally from a campaign. And I'm very interested to see how that looks. It's probably going to be really bad, the first one. And then like by the 5th one, it's going to be like not so embarrassing. But this is social media, right? This is what we're talking about. This is how campaigns are trying to figure out how to campaign in this time of COVID. I don't think it's a question anymore of using the best practices from the past, because there literally is no best practice for campaigning in a pandemic. There's no playbook. There's literally nothing in the history of the modern internet where we have been in this kind of situation. So what I am telling a lot of folks is, listen, it's not there. A lot of people say, well, there's no such thing as a bad idea. There are a lot of bad ideas out there, but in this time, there's not many ideas in general of how to do this. And so try what you can. If it doesn't work, all right, move on, right? But at least you now know it doesn't work. But we don't really know what's going to work and what doesn't, because right now so many people's attention also is focused on COVID and the economic crisis and trying to stay alive. And so a lot of what we're going to see and a lot of the potential of what we're going to see impact is not going to happen until probably later in the summer, going into early fall. Okay, I want to stop there because I just a lot of ranting and threw a lot of stuff. I think, I know we're supposed to give out some sort of homework assignment, but I also think this is just a great place to be able to take questions, or if someone wants us to tell a crazy story from the past, we're happy to tell some crazy stories as well. So I guess we want to open it up to the floor.
Good job, Tim.
Hey, I have a question. Good to see you again, Tim, and nice to meet you. My question is about the role of data in digital and how digital teams and analytics teams work together to target voters, target advertising, decide on messaging, like messaging on social media and that sort of thing.
Sure. I think both Lauren and I can speak to that. I think it's a question we're getting a lot of. So from my experience, I mean, we're taking a lot of the data that the analytics team and the data teams are putting together in terms of persuadable audiences, base audiences, messaging that works towards those base and persuadable audiences, and we're building out models, right? We're building out these voter models. Basically, we're scoring the entire, the voter file, saying 0 to 100, this person is likely to be a candidate X voter. 0 to 100, this person is likely to be a pro-choice voter. 0 to 100, this person is a likely environmental voter who's a likely general election voter. So there's a lot of different models that are out there and there's a lot of different message tests and message treatments to see what's working, what's not. And then you take those models and then you match them to different platforms on Facebook, on Google, on Verizon Media. I mean, a ton of different platforms, and then you're targeting those people specifically. There have been some changes lately to that has kind of stopped political campaigns from fully being able to exercise those data targets. Google's made some changes that have made it a little bit more difficult to target on voter file data. But for the most part, I mean, you know, that is the type of targeting that you're going to be seeing on digital. It's very specific, tailored messaging to very specific audience segments. I would say the other thing that we're encouraging, that we want campaigns to realize, is that it's not just who people are, it's what people do. So a lot of times you want to target behavior online. Like for instance, if someone's searching about your candidate online, it means that they're interested. That's intent. And targeting intent is way more important actually than targeting who you are. So if someone's searching, I want to vote for candidate X and I don't know how, right? Things like that, and that is a great person to bring into the fold and get them on board. Or if they're consuming content or articles about your candidate, if they're visiting specific sites, if they're listening to specific music, this all kind of plays into a role of who the voter is and what likely the voter are going to do or not do. And that's the type of relationship you want to see between a data team and a digital team.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off that as well, I mean, I think from a messaging, kind of traditional comms perspective, you really let the data inform and shape the message. If you have, let's say you have a suburban mom who, she's searching for, articles about, I don't know, right now, like homeschooling your kids, or I'm trying to think of other things, just like general, like maybe she's interested in celebrity news, she's interested in recipes, like things like that. And then if you have that person also looking at your candidate, then you might want to say, okay, if we have a lot of these suburban moms that are looking at education policy right now, where are we as a campaign with our platform on education? Are we emphasizing it? And are we emphasizing it in these specific areas where people maybe could be persuaded on that issue alone? So you kind of look at the data to mine the issues that are driving the voters, and then you try to tailor your messaging to it.
Thank you.
If I might hop in next. Hi, Tim. Hi, Lauren. Great to see you both. Hope you're doing well.
Hey, what's going on, Brady?
Yeah, doing well. So it's two questions here that are both fairly brief and are for either person. So first, do you think that the shift to digital will structurally benefit either the left or the right going forward? And then two, do you think that, this is more for Lauren, but Tim, feel free as well. Do you think that how will earned media change going forward, and that it can't be kind of going to this cool event, right? How will that shift online? Thank you.
Yeah, I can take that second one first. It's dramatically shifting earned media. I'm working with a couple of different campaigns and also a PAC right now that's supporting female candidates. And so the conversation has changed from, what is on the candidate's calendar, the schedule, what's the messaging, to what are you doing digitally that's interesting, that may be an earned media play. Are you doing, like I saw a candidate this morning, send out an email saying, do you need face masks? With information about how the campaign would like to help provide those to people in this time. Like a year ago, if you had told me that a candidate was doing that, I would be like, that's completely insane. But I mean, it's a way to use the times that we find ourselves in a way that could benefit the campaign. Like I looked at that and I was like, that's actually kind of an interesting earned media play, right? And so I think instead of it, being more traditional than it has in the past, right, where a lot of the earned media is based on work done in Congress, events, things like that, it's almost all, at least right now, it's almost all digital. And I think it makes the importance of trying to hit that viral moment even like exponentially greater. But it's a double-edged sword, because campaigning right now is very tricky, and you don't want to come off in a negative light. You don't want it to come off as someone who's trying to use a crisis to their advantage. And so it becomes very complicated about, it becomes very complicated about what you can and can't do. I will say the candidate that I've had the most success with so far this cycle in terms of getting earned media in the time of COVID, she's someone that's in, I think, the Navy Reserves, and got called up to go serve on the Comfort outside of New York. And so just suspended her campaign, obviously, to go and do that. And so, we had maybe a 12-hour window before she knew she was leaving and needed to get underway to go to Norfolk to get on the ship to then go to New York. And so it's like how to just share the story without seeming like you're capitalizing on the crisis. But just the idea that anyone, I think the stories of all of the people serving on those ships are interesting. And I think regardless of whether or not you're a candidate for office, I think that anybody that's on the front lines of this crisis should be celebrated. So that's like probably the most successful moment we've had in terms of like trying to get earned media in the time of COVID, but that was like a very special case. And the problem becomes if you're a candidate that doesn't really have anything to offer, maybe isn't a medical professional, isn't in the armed services, like any of that, I think the question then becomes, is even trying to do something going to backfire on you? Because it very well may. Because you just don't want to be taking advantage of a crisis, especially one that's claiming thousands of lives every day. And so there is a lot of potential blowback as well.
Sorry, my speakers just went out completely. Okay, if you can hear me, I'm gonna just keep talking. Great. So in terms of like who it favors, this is one of those like galactic impactful shifts that I don't think it really favors anybody. I think that every campaign and every program has truly been affected on a level that no one anticipated, and now we're just scrambling. So my base my base theory right now is that this just kind of screws everybody over, and that everyone just kind of has to figure out from there how to reach. I think the bigger question is going to be less about digital campaigning and more about how to vote. The question that I'm dealing with a lot of my clients is, what is voting going to look like in the fall of 2020? And is it VBM? Is it is it going to be sorry, 1 second. My Zoom is definitely doing something weird on me. But is it going to be VBM? Is it going to be Vote Mail Plus? Is it going to be is it going to be just absentee voting? There's a lot of questions I think that needs to be figured out. And I think this is going to be funny to say. I was on the phone with ARP this morning and their magazine. I said, I think you're going to see VBM voters, older voters over the age of 50, actually have a much bigger influence on this election than ever before. And so it's kind of ironic because that's the audience that you would least suspect to be persuadable with digital advertising, but they'll probably have the highest voting rates. So yeah, I mean, that just goes to show how crazy and weird this election is going to get.
Thank you very much.
I actually have a question kind of following up on what you just mentioned about older voters, Tim. My name's Katrina, I'm a senior. But I was kind of wondering, given that there's going to have to be such a focus on digital advertising, social media, you were kind of mentioning like, a rally on Animal Crossing. How do you...
Or my Zoom is like going on and off. I'm going to call right back in. Sorry.
All good. Lauren, maybe you can speak to this as well, though, too, in the meantime. But
Sure.
how will you shift your strategies to target older voters who maybe might not be as traditionally social media savvy, and countering that with what he was actually just mentioning about how there might even be a higher voter turnout among older voters?
Yeah, well, and to kind of weigh in also on Brady's question previously. I actually think it gives a slight advantage to Democrat candidates, the turn to digital, just because, as you say, I mean, older voters aren't as social media savvy. And so I think the question then becomes, how do you reach those people? Traditionally, I will say, I mean, there is an older kind of sway to Facebook, which I think is why, Tim said that's still the number one. And it's because, like, I'm aging myself here, but like, I remember when non-college kids could get onto Facebook and like everybody's parents were so excited, and like 15 years later, those people are still excited and on Facebook. And so I think that's why you see a lot of Facebook messaging to older Americans. And I also think, there's been a lot of controversy, especially on the right, with, Facebook censoring, monitoring. Ted Cruz loves to rail about how it's biased towards conservatives. But I think because of that, there's actually a special attention going on to try to make sure that things are pretty fair. And so I think, with the older Republican voters, I think if you're going to reach them digitally, that's maybe the only way that you do. So for the rest of that demo, I think you'll still see a lot of the traditional efforts in terms of, you can now do call banking from an iPhone with an app. You don't have to go to an office. Welcome back, Tim. You don't have to go to a traditional office to do a phone bank, right? You can download the, one app, i360 is one that people use, and you can literally sit in the comfort of your own home and work your way through a call sheet. I think we're still going to see a lot of that.
In the meeting now.
In
There
terms
are
of
more than 20
other
participants in the meeting. This meeting is being recorded.
In terms of other non-digital strategies, I still think you'll see a fair amount of mail, especially in state and local races. There are a lot of questions about whether or not mail is effective. But, to the extent that you now have this problem where you need to reach older voters and you can't reach them in person, I do think you'll see, reliance on things like traditional call banking, mail, and honestly traditional, banner search ads, things like that, because it's not so much like, obviously the very extreme set of, older voters are not as much on a computer, but, if you look at somebody like my dad's age, who's 70 years old, I mean, he's on his phone all the time. And so it's like, I still think there's a digital element there. I just think it's different. Like, you're not going to target a 65 plus population on TikTok. Like, you're just not going to do it. Cause like full disclosure, I'm not on TikTok, but I've seen all the TikTok videos of like people with their dads doing the weekend dance. But like, that's the only time you see, people of that generation on TikTok is when they're, joining their younger counterparts. So, I definitely still think that there are ways, but I think that you'll still have to rely on the traditional methods. Do you want to just reiterate your question for Tim? She was just asking about trying to reach an older population in a campaign year that's going to be so heavy digital.
Yeah, that was it. Thanks. Oh, Tim, you're muted.
Right. Can you hear me now? Okay. I caught what Lauren said on the back end, and I completely agree with everything. It was funny. I went on my call with the AARP magazine writer. She was like, well, I just wanted to dispel the myth that older Americans aren't using digital. But I was like, yeah, I'm not saying that. I think what we all agree is they just are not online as much as everyone else. Under the age of 50, and I think that they're not used to consuming political ad information, and we agreed upon that. So I think that there's just going to be a lot of it is just going to be a lot of trial and error. I think it's going to be a lot of focusing on radio, focusing on landline. I think that's one thing that we're trying to also get people to remember. I think around 20 to 40 million people don't have broadband access, and we have to make sure that we reach those people as well. So it's just going to be a combination of a lot of different things. And, like I said, there's no playbook, so we're going to see what works and what doesn't.
Well, yeah, and just to piggyback off of that, that's why it becomes so important, for example, for presidential campaigns to have state-based staff that know what they're doing. Because if you don't, and you try to, you try to reach an area where broadband isn't prevalent, that's going to be a real problem if the campaign doesn't even know about that. And so that's why, especially as you guys who, you're going to be coming out of college soon, obviously the sexiest jobs at a political campaign are the ones at headquarters or, things like that. But state staff really matters, especially well-educated state staff. And so that's one way I think that, if a campaign wants to get an advantage, they really have to drill down and make sure that their local operatives are very much in tune with the state. Anyone else have questions for us?
I have a quick question. This is for either of you. You've talked a lot about paid advertising and metrics, which are hard to do on low cost campaigns, student run efforts, things like that. How would you get around those sorts of obstacles, and how on such a small dollar kind of platform use it also digital social media for reason?
Yeah, I mean it's a great question. A lot of those best practices that I had mentioned are for organic content posting. So, right, keep it sweet, keep it short. Don't character counts, visuals, stand out, pop out. Use emojis. Use different types of ways to break out of the conversation. These are all organic pieces. With paid, because you're forcing the answer, you're just putting the ad in front of somebody, right? You don't necessarily need to be as eye grabbing, because you're already putting yourself into the conversation. In that case, it's really about what message do you want the end user to see. But organic, which basically is non-paid online organizing, yeah, I mean what it doesn't require in money, it requires in time and attention, right? And so when you're posting, right, like using the best practices, but also making sure that you're being attentive, that you're tracking it, that you're constantly seeing what's engaged and what's not. These analytics tools are available to you even if you weren't spending money on paid advertising. So you can look at your back end, you can see, okay, this is my Twitter engagement rates, these are my post engagement rates, and how are these engaging with, these are the topics that people are engaging on, these are the topics that people are not. It takes a lot more time as well. So if you're not doing paid, you have to be patient. You have to realize that these things just take time to grow, and it takes time to pop, essentially. So just be very patient. And the last thing is, it doesn't require a lot of money to do paid on Facebook and Twitter. These are platforms that are used to taking like $10, $15, $20 a day or something like that in order to make something go live on ads. So, this is not the high end paid advertising option. You have a lot of small businesses who are using social media advertising in order to get their word out, small restaurants, etc., using it. So, it takes a variety of different kind of tactics and strategies in order to be able to get the ROI, or be able to get the objectives you want. But a lot of what's been laid out early in this call, that is purely for being able to have best practices on their organic content.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that too, I think, if you are in a situation where, you don't necessarily have the ad dollars, what we traditionally call in the campaign world is surrogates, right? So people who will go out and speak on behalf of your campaign. I would challenge you to see if there are any, modern day we would call influencers that you could maybe encourage to post about your effort. Maybe it's a friend who has a huge Instagram following, or, someone that has a lot of Twitter following, whatever it is, I would do some research about maybe who kind of in your in your base of people that you're trying to reach, maybe just has an organically strong social media following, and approach them to see if they might be interested in doing something. Like a good example that I like to use, I'm friends with Shoshana Weissman, who's a Twitter influencer. I think she has at least 100,000, and she's kind of a, conservative, libertarian minded person. And, I'll often text her and say, hey, it would really mean a lot to us if you could, tweet this or give us a retweet. And so try to think about people that may be interested in supporting your cause that already have a following and engaging with them.
All right.
Okay.
So, oh, sorry. Did you want to pop in, Tim?
No, please, Paula, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, if there aren't any more questions, then I just wanted to say thank you very much to Lauren and Tim for providing all of your insight today. I think this was really helpful. And I don't know if you guys are okay with it. A lot of times students will ask for your contact to reach out right when this is over. Would that be all right? Great. So
That's
anyone
great.
who wants to personally connect with Lauren or Tim, feel free to reach out to me and I'll connect you all. And thank you all for tuning in today.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank
Have
you.
a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.